Welcome to Visual Literacy. This session will make some connections to arts integration with a focus on literature and reading, but with a bit of a spin as we walk through the philosophy of visual literacy itself, as well as visual thinking. I am the art teacher and A+ magnet coordinator at Dix Latham Elementary School. This is my 17th year. I've taught K-5 art, AG, guided reading. I've worked with small group instruction, tech facilitation, and I currently, as I said, serve as the A+ magnet coordinator. Right now, our school is approximately 500 students. When it was smaller, I always did art plus something else. So my diverse licensure really helps me see the connections between core and non-core. If you're not familiar, A+ Schools is an initiative that started in 1995. It is North Carolina based. It has a presence in Raleigh. There are over 60 schools across the state that have taken the professional development to be A+. A+ schools uphold these 8 essentials that you're looking at on the screen with the focus on arts integration. But arts integration is not the only component. Your climate, planning for collaboration, the way you teach and assess has a lot more to do with A+ schools. As the coordinator, I attend meetings with A+ liaisons, the director of A+ schools, and help my classroom teachers as well as specialists bridge that gap for integration. If you're not familiar with A+ schools, you're probably more familiar with magnet schools. We are also a magnet school with the theme of arts integration and performance. So putting the A+ philosophy and the magnet pillars together really makes a lot of sense since they're both connected to the arts. So we're going to jump right in and just think about this question. What is visual literacy? What is visual literacy? And I'm going to give you a Jamboard in the chat. I want you to go in there and answer that question. If you're not familiar with how to use Jamboard, I'll share the screen again for a second and remind you. So your tools are over to the left. You can click a sticky note, type it, and then it'll appear on the board. You can click text and make a text box. Please make sure you leave space for other people to respond. So choose a sticky note or choose a text box and respond there. So I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to respond. Take about 1 more minute to get your sticky note on there. So as you can see, there are some connections to your thoughts. And then yet again, there's some wide range of ideas. Being able to imagine the stories that happens, I see bringing words to life, being creative in instruction, visualizing what is being read or spoken, using pictures to tell a story, understanding the text through images, visual comprehension. Basically, you know, all these ideas and I don't know where all your answers went, but that's okay. All these ideas kind of represent that visual literacy philosophy. If you research visual literacy, there are individuals, school systems, those that focus on professional development that have very specific ideas, creating visual literacy as a school of thought. And then others simply say it's a way to read, interpret, and understand what you see. And of course, you can see the connection with visual literacy in the arts, in the art world, but you can also see the connection, you know, with reading. And so thinking about visual literacy and what you know about arts integration before we go much further, now I want you to visit this Padlet. I want you to compare and contrast visual literacy. How do visual literacy and arts integration compare and contrast? So let me give you that link in the chat box. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to respond. And while you are thinking through that question, if you're not familiar with Padlet, it is free to download and create an account. The Padlet wall has several different options. You can make it more of a collage. You can make it more freeform. You have 3 Padlet walls that you can use for free. If you want to add additional ones, there's a cost. You can also download what you've already created as a JPEG and then start over. So you just keep using the same 3 over and over. So as we're comparing and contrasting visual literacy and arts integration, you all are saying that some of the similarities are it helps students who have trouble visualizing. It's using art to express. Both use arts and visuals to learn and express. Sure. Some of the differences: visual literacy is a representation of learning. Arts integration has to deal with different types of arts. Sure. So you guys are definitely thinking in the right direction. So if we go back to our presentation, School of Thought from the Kennedy Learning Center, as well as with connections to A+ schools, says that arts integration is simply an approach to teaching where the student has the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding through an art form. Students engage in a creative process and they connect core and non-core objectives, core and non-core subject matter. You are literally teaching 2 subjects at the same time. It's not simply, well, we drew a picture about the book we read. You are bringing in specific art skills along with the reading objectives that you're teaching, or vice versa. And that would be the case with whatever subject you choose to integrate. So when we think of arts integration in reading, you're teaching English language arts while simultaneously teaching objectives from other art curriculum. You're making connections to the creative process while teaching reading skills. So for our first activity related to visual literacy, we're going to do what's called back-to-back drawing. And this works better in person. You would partner up. One person would look at an image and either describe it to the person who is not looking or allow the person who is not looking to ask questions about the image. So I thought about breakout rooms and a lot of different scenarios. I wasn't sure how many people we were going to have. So with 58 people, we're going to do this activity a little bit differently. I'm going to look at the image and I want you guys to either in chat or just unmute and ask me some questions about it. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And then if I think there's some specific details that you need to know, then I will just offer that up. So you need a scratch piece of paper, something to draw with. It can be as detailed as you like or as simple as you like, but you are basically going to draw a picture based on my description. Are there any questions about that right now?
No.
Okay, so what do you need to know if you were going to draw this image? Just, you can unmute and ask me a question about it, or you can put the questions in chat.
Is it outside?
It is outside.
Is it a person, place, or thing? Or does this have to be yes or no questions?
You can ask me whatever you choose. It does include people. It is a place. The questions in chat, there are multiple shapes there.
Is it related to a season?
No, there are no animals. There's not much nature. In fact, hardly any, even though it's outside.
Is it on this planet?
Yes. It is not a playground.
Can you drive on it?
You mostly walk on it.
Are sports played on it?
No. There is a sidewalk there, but it's not the only thing there.
And is it school related?
No. It is not a park. No, you don't play with it.
Are there
there lots
buildings around?
I think you asked about buildings, yes. You could possibly shop. I don't think it's hot. There are about 17 or 18 people. A question in the chat, it could possibly be part of a shopping center. Yes, food related, and no, there are no vehicles. Roxana says, is it an outdoor cafe? Erica asks, is it outside dining? Yes. And yes, Marie, there are tables. Not a picnic, no. So let me give you a few more details, and then I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to draw. There are primary colors used. There's quite a bit of texture. It is a composition that fills the entire page, and it's happening at night. So if you think about the questions that have already been answered and those few details, I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to draw what you think this looks like. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask me. So if you were to do this activity in your classroom, you could have one image and half of the class receives the image and half of the class would be those drawing. You could have multiple images still with the same scenario, one partner looking at it, the other partner not. The question in the chat asks, is it a night sky? Yes. Fireworks? No. I do not see any yellow stars. In fact, there's not a whole lot of sky showing. I do not see any strings of light. And of course, this is a diverse group, many of which may not be artists, some who are not art teachers. So I don't expect this to be any kind of a masterpiece. In fact, you could use symbolism to represent the images. It could be abstract. Your students are going to say the same thing. I don't know how to draw people. I don't know how to draw X, Y, Z. I'm not good at, this particular image. That's okay. It's really more about the thinking process and the interpretation of what is being described. So go ahead and just get to your last detail. And I'm going to share, actually, anybody that's brave enough to turn your camera on and share your drawing with us, we would love to see them. And then I'll share the image with you. No takers. No one wants us to see what they came up with. Oh, yes. Let's see. Okay, nice. Awesome. Of course, you're going to see several different interpretations. Thank you, Allison, for sharing with us. Awesome. So, oh, we have another brave soul. Marie. Nice. Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Miss Ortiz, are you going to share? Okay, very abstract, small. I love it. And I saw how you heard my comment about primary colors. All right, Marcel. Excellent. You're putting some perspective in there. Great. And of course, there may be questions that you guys are thinking about that I didn't answer. Obviously your interpretation is going to depend on your own experience. If you've been to a place like this or seen a place like this, you can make connections. If you haven't, you may not have a clue what I'm even describing. All right, so here you go. Here's our image. A Cafe Terrace at Night by Vincent van Gogh. And of course, his style is very unique. He was an expressionist painter. So his goal was to capture the emotion of the space. You would have had to know that there was a bit of an awning hanging over. You can see how some objects have more detail than others. The people aren't very clear with his particular style. I could have chosen a very simple image that showed just one object. I chose an actual composition, an actual painting. But what skills do you think back-to-back drawing would really be teaching? You can put it in chat or you can unmute and share. What skills would your students learn from that activity? All right, so the chat says communication and listening, abstract thinking, point of view, direction following, questioning, vocabulary, comprehension, patience, perspective, higher order thinking, background building. Sure, absolutely. Giving details, there's that social and emotional connection that somebody sort of mentioned. And sure, all those ideas, focus of literature, comprehension, excellent. All those ideas really hone in on 21st century skills. And you guys pretty much hit them all. The critical thinking piece, the creativity, whether you're artistic or not, you can be creative in the way that you show what you're thinking. Collaborating. I mentioned partners. You could have a group of 3, of 4, and really kind of depending on each other to make it happen. That growth mindset of, making connections with your classmates and building citizenship. So absolutely. And also, as we're kind of thinking about 21st century skills, as well as moving from visual literacy to really interpreting what you see, to looking more deliberately at arts integration, there are connections and similarities between art criticism, the writing process, and retelling a story. Now, there's not always direct correlation with each step, but if you kind of look at this simple breakdown, you can see the similarities and differences. When you make art or when you observe art, you move through this analysis of describing what you see, then analyzing it, interpreting the meaning versus evaluating the technique, In the writing process, you have the steps of the pre-write, the draft, the revision, and then finally the editing and the publishing. And then with retail, looking at guided reading or really taking the steps to dissect the story, find the characters, the setting, the problem, you can see the connections of those processes. So as we progress through the session, I want you to keep in mind that you can read an image the same way you read text. Anything that you choose to teach with text, whether it's a book, whether it's a poem, whether it's a short story or an essay, you can teach those same skills with an image. And if you are in, elementary school or early elementary school where you may have non-readers, to really teach those skills before they're able to read with an image is so important, just to help build some background knowledge. And to really scaffold them as they're progressing through becoming that reader. So I want to take you through this process of studying an image just like you would if you were going to read a book. So first of all, you have your pre-reading activities. You're going to predict what you think the story is about. So unmute or in chat, make some predictions. If this image was a story, what do you think it's going to be about based on what you see?
Family reunion.
Okay.
Old friends gathering together to experience past experiences.
I have quilting, working together, women sharing experiences in the chat. Any other thoughts? Melanie sees Vincent van Gogh in the background. Other ideas, women's history, best friends working together. So these are the ideas that come to mind at first glance. Now, if this was a book, we would walk through page by page, image by image to do the picture walk. So now thinking of the idea of visual literacy and not just looking at the surface, try to look for the details and tell me specifically what you see. All right, so Ms. Ortiz says honoring those who have come before us. And someone already picked out Vincent van Gogh. Aaron sees different versions of the sunflower. So now we're seeing the field, we're seeing the quilt, the primary colors in the apartment buildings. We have friendship, a neighborhood, notable African-American women, a celebration of community. So now you're really starting to move from the specific aesthetic shapes, colors that you see and looking at them more in detail, as well as starting to interpret what do they actually mean. You can be very literal about, you see a white border and you see flowers and you see primary colors, or you can be a little bit more abstract as you guys have done and see community and working together. And if you recognize the people, then obviously that really brings more meaning to this work of art. So if this was a book, then now you would read it. So you're going to look, at the title page and think about some historical information. All right, Brianna says the colorful buildings makes her think about a potential setting. Roxana says excerpts from the depicted authors. All right, great. So you see how I did not tell you the title or give you a whole lot of information other than what you are seeing. So now, if we were reading this as text, the title is The Sunflowers Quilting Bee at Arles. It's by an author and artist, Faith Ringgold. So you could give your students all this information at once, or you could break it down. Faith Ringgold is from California. She has written several children's books, and most of her illustrations are story quilts. So you can see the outline around the images where you see the quilting squares, patchwork. And then she sometimes paints right on top of the quilt. And so this is actually a lithograph, and many of you already noticed that there are 8 African-American women depicted. And you can read the list of all their names. And then, of course, there's Vincent van Gogh with his connection to sunflowers. And Vincent van Gogh was an artist that did a series of sunflowers. And then you could start to talk about symbolism, traditions. As I mentioned, Faith Ringgold is a painter, a sculptor, a quilter, performing artist. And so now that we have quote unquote read the painting, read the book, then after reading, we're going to retell the story. And also you can think about your predictions. You can think about the images that you noticed and decide were you correct or not. And so what is the setting of the story? You can unmute or put it in chat. And of course there's not really any right or wrong answer. So Brianna is saying she's definitely thinking the South. And based on what we see, we know we're in a sunflower field outside of a town. There's warm climate. Good, Anna. And then based on the historical figures, we could talk about a time period, although we now know the year that the artist painted this. And, we may not even be sure whether she meant this to go back in time during Van Gogh's period, or if it's more about the time period of the women. More excellent comments in the chat. A potential historical exhibit opening, and a town near water. All right, great. And then we've already mentioned the characters, the historical women, Vincent van Gogh. And then, you could go a little bit further and you could talk about, well, is there a conflict, and how would you solve it? And the conflict could be a wide range of things. You could talk about the conflict that the historical women had to deal with. You could talk about a potential conflict in the setting of the town and the sunflowers. So there are many, many directions that your discussion could go into. Are there any questions about using an image and reading an image to teach some guided reading skills or some literacy skills? Any other questions or comments? So you guys are doing a great job with using these visual literacy skills to walk through these processes. There is a school of thought, even a professional development series called Visual Thinking Strategies. And you're going to get this presentation at the end. You can visit their homepage with the link at the bottom. But basically, they do what we've done in a couple of different ways. whether it's reading the text or whether it's the same skills that we used with our back-to-back drawing. They basically say in order to teach a student to really look and observe and not just sort of glance and see an image, that you walk them through a series of questions where they have a moment to just look at the image, to decide what they think is going on in the picture, to infer, to summarize, and then you get more and more deliberate about the questions that you ask, giving them a chance to just determine what they see, what they can find, and then interpret that a little bit deeper. And again, if you research visual thinking strategies, visual literacy, it all sort of comes down to this idea of being able to really deliberately see what you're looking at. But there's also sort of a broad range of ideas on how to approach it. So with that in mind, there are many different possible activities that you could do before, during, and after reading an image, as you see here. So, you know, your students could create a bubble map of their findings, or you could write a story with the whole class, where one student gives a word, phrase, or sentence, and then the next student adds to it, and it goes round and round. That could be kind of a ticket out the door, or a summarizing activity. Of course, you can retell the story, write a haiku, and even use an image to teach parts of speech, which we're going to do an activity with that in a moment. Are there any other ideas that you can think of activities to really assess or allow the student to use what they've learned when reading an image? Feel free to unmute or to write in chat.
Can you please repeat your question again?
So based on the ideas that you see here, activities that you could offer to your students after reading an image, what are some other ideas that you have to allow the student to use what they've learned from the image, or for you to assess their understanding?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to keep thinking on that. If you guys want to add anything in chat, we'll come back and review. So I mentioned teaching parts of speech with an image. So most of us are familiar with the traditional Starry Night by Van Gogh, but this is one work in that series, The Starry Night Over the Rhone River. So I wanted to just give you an image that you may not be familiar with. All right, so in the chat, Patricia tells us that a group of women coming together to duplicate their own style of nature sunflowers. You could focus on one at a time. You could look at adjectives related to what you see. Absolutely. How it makes you feel, how the image makes you feel. Perfect. So I want you guys to look at the Starry Night Over the Rhone. And in chat, I want you to list the nouns that you see. What are the nouns that you see in this image? What nouns do you see in this painting? So we have water, stars, boat, people, river, women, trees, a pond, a light, boat. Sure. Trees, reflections. And right from the beginning, you're going to get the obvious. You're going to get the sky. You're going to get the water. And then you're going to help your students look a little bit closer, which you guys are doing. So now you're seeing waves in the water, and you're seeing halos around the stars, and you're seeing the ripples. Some people are looking in the background and seeing the townscape. And some details may not be as obvious as others. Someone decided they're seeing lightning bugs. You're seeing the clothing of the people. All right, perfect. So now let's change our discussion to verbs. And this is going to maybe force you to infer a little bit more. So what verbs do you see represented in this painting? We see rippling, walking, twinkle, love, shining, look, moving, shimmering, floating, flowing. Sure. And serenity. Okay. And so as we said before, wandering, if you just ask them, what do you literally see? That's one level of thinking. When they have to infer what's happening in a still, inanimate painting, it's a little bit different because there's no literal action happening unless we were in this space. So we still have hearing, movement. Fantastic. And now we've looked at nouns, we've looked at verbs, and of course you would explain to your students, that a noun is a person, place, or thing. The verb would be the action. Now let's look for adjectives. And you could even talk about fact and opinion when you start to really look at adjectives and describing what you see. So we see calm, dark, serene, blurry, shiny, caring, bright, shimmering, scary, loving, helping, blue, yellow, lonely, and of course you can ask them to justify, why do you think you see lonely? If anyone that wrote that would like to unmute and explain that to us, that would be fantastic.
Did I see lonely?
Yes, where do you see that, or why do you think that?
I see lonely because I see these two people far away from, what may be a town. It's dark. They're alone. They look like they're embracing each other. It's cold. They're looking up, so they look a little lost.
Sure. And then someone wrote solemn. Would you like to explain what you were thinking when you wrote solemn?
I think it's the colors, and then of course what the former colleague said about them being kind of alone and separated. But I don't see any big waves. It's just it seems quiet, and I think the colors make me feel like it's solemn.
Sure. And so again, it's really up to the observer, what they see, what they feel, how they see it. There's really no right or wrong answer. So now, moving away, well, first of all, let me give you a little bit more information. I can let you read this later.
Can I say something about
Yeah,
what you just said?
Sure.
Also, too, based on, experiences or background knowledge that,
Absolutely.
in the classroom students may have, or we may have.
Absolutely. You're right. And, creating that safe place for everyone to share their own thoughts or feelings. There's no judgment. You notice when I responded to you all, it was just thanking you for your participation. Not really saying whether you're right or wrong. But you're absolutely right. And so, we started out with just the image, and then here there's, a little bit more information about what you're looking at, the subject matter, Van Gogh's painting style, and a little bit more background information that may or may not be important for this particular activity. And now, as we are gonna move a little bit deeper into arts integration, I want you to look back through chat, and I want you to look at the nouns, the verbs, and the adjectives. And I want you, probably more specifically with adjectives, to choose some, and I want you to illustrate them by creating a monster. Now that's moving away from the Starry Night painting, but I want you to use our list of adjectives, and I want you to illustrate at least those adjectives, if not verbs or the nouns, and draw your own monster. So I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to get that sketched. And does anybody have any questions about that? And obviously, if we're doing this activity of creating a monster based on a list of verbs, nouns, and adjectives, you don't have to necessarily get that list from a painting. You could get it from a text, or you could just, brainstorm the list before the students do the drawing. Take about 1 more minute to finish up your sketches. And of course, you could give your students, as much time as you would like. This could be a homework activity. So as you're finishing up, just sort of a brainstorm idea of using those lists of nouns, verbs, and adjectives to create your monster. Would anyone like to turn on your camera and show us what you created, or even unmute and explain the words that you chose to illustrate? No takers. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I see a few people. Andrea, Roxana. Okay. Miss Campbell. All right, let me find the rest of you guys. To pin you, there's Charles. Does anybody want to unmute and explain the words that you illustrated?
My words are dark, blurry, and scary. So that wave around him would be him being blurry, but I don't really know how to draw blurry.
Nice.
Scary and lonely.
Yeah, I chose dark, lonely, scary.
Thank you.
And my word is worried. I don't think that was a word, but it's something that I was thinking about.
Great. You guys did a nice job. And there's some comments in the chat that said those were nice monsters. So what other way could you use drawing to explore parts of speech? I mean, really, you could ask them to draw anything. You could show them a landscape painting and have them identify the parts of speech that are represented and then have them draw their own landscape. You could do the same thing with a portrait and talk about citizenship. I mean, there are so many different connections that you could use. And so I hope you guys can kind of see how we have kind of bridged from visual literacy, reading an image like a text, dissecting an image with reading or literature skills, and then bringing in a little bit of the arts integration. Now, I didn't take the time to teach you guys some of the art theory as far as, you know, color wheel, realistic and abstract. You know, we could talk about geometric and organic shapes. So to have true arts integration, you would bring those objectives into that lesson as well. And then I kind of just gave you a brainstorming list of some other ways that starts to create those true integration moments. And of course, this is not exhaustive at all. But there's 2 slides with lists. Anytime that you're illustrating, creating a movie poster, drawing from a prompt, or doing a journal writing from an image, creating logos and using symbolism, you know, the list can kind of go on and on and on. Are there any questions or comments based on our monster drawing or this list of integration ideas?
I think this has been a really helpful class.
So I teach first grade, and I've used like a picture that would you know, I would give them a crazy picture, and then they would have to write about it, and they were, you know, really excited about that activity.
Sounds great. So I want you guys to do one more thing, and this is also a graphic organizer that you can use with your students, just to kind of assess what they've been learning. And while you do this, I'm going to put the attendance link, the feedback link, the presentation link, and the handout in chat for you. So on your sketch paper, you can either trace your hand or free draw a hand. So go ahead and draw one hand on your paper. Again, either tracing it or, you know, free drawing it. And then once you draw the hand, in the palm, I want you to write a word that summarizes a big idea that you're going to take away or that you've learned today. So draw a hand, and in the palm, write a big idea that you're going to take away today. And then on the fingers, I want you to write details related to that big idea or main topic.
Can you repeat the fingers one again?
Sure. On the fingers, I want you to write details related to the big idea or main topic that you wrote on your poem. And then on the thumb, as if you're giving a thumbs up, write a word, sentence, or phrase related to something that went well, you liked, or an idea that inspired you today. So you drew your hand, you have a main idea as a takeaway on the palm. You have details related to that main idea on your fingers, and on your thumb, as if you're giving a thumbs up, write something that you liked, were inspired by, or that went well in the session. And if you slide over to the chat, there's the attendance form again, the feedback form, the slideshow itself, and the outline of the presentation. Would anyone like to share your hand really quickly and what you wrote on it?
All right, so on my palm, I had creating a different picture from that's after viewing, that picture, then what pops out, nouns and verbs and adjectives and integration. And then what stood out for me was where you're getting feedback from students. You are not making them feel left out or feeling that what they're saying is incorrect, but you're letting them feeling a part of the discussion.
Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Ms. Ortiz.
So here's mine. And I wrote connection up at the top, and then by the thumb, reading images, and then by the fingers, they're kind of together there, daring to explore together. So thank you for this. This is really wonderful and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you for participating. I know we're a couple minutes over time, so again, if you check chat, you get the presentation link. At the end of the presentation, there are some useful links as well as my contact information. And the attendance link is in chat as well. Attendance feedback, the presentation, and the presentation outline.
Best class of my day.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Was very relaxing.
Have a good afternoon, guys. Thank you for coming.
You too. Thank you. I hope you do this again.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.